I thought I would read A Walk in the Woods, at least the first chapter. The film is one of my favourite films. I happen to have the book too. So, yeah, we'll see how we get on. Not long after I moved with my family to a small town in New Hampshire, I happened upon a path that vanished into a wood on the edge of town. A sign announced that this was no ordinary footpath, but the celebrated Appalachian Trail, running more than 2,100 miles along America's eastern seaboard. Through the serene and beckoning Appalachian Mountains, the AT is the granddaddy of long hikes. The Virginia portion alone is twice the length of the Pennine Way. From Georgia to Maine, it wanders across 14 states through plump, comely hills whose very names, Blue Ridge, Smokies, Cumberlands, Catskills, Green Mountains, White Mountains, seem an invitation to amble. Who could say the words Great Smoky Mountains or Shenandoah Valley and not feel an urge, as the naturalist John Muir once put it, to throw a loaf of bread and pound of tea in an old sack and jump over the back fence? And here it was, quite unexpectedly meandering in a dangerously beguiling fashion through the pleasant New England community in which I had just settled. It seemed such an extraordinary notion, the idea that I could set off from home and walk 1,800 miles through woods to Georgia, or turn the other way and clamber over the rough and stony White Mountains to the fabled prow of Mount Catandin, floating in forest 450 miles to the north in a wilderness few have even seen. A little voice in my head said, "Sounds neat, let's do it." I formed a number of rationalizations. It would get me fit after years of watersome sloth. It would be useful. I wasn't quite sure in what way, but I was sure nonetheless to learn to fend for myself in the wilderness. When guys in camouflage pants and hunting hats sat around in the Four Aces diner talking about fearsome things done out of doors, I would no longer have to feel like such a cupcake. I wanted to have a little of that swagger that comes with being able to gaze a far horizon through eyes of chipped granite and say with a slow, manly sniff, "Yeah, I've shit in the woods." And there was a more compelling reason to go. The Appalachians are the home of one of the world's great hardwood forests, a relic of the richest, most diversified sweep of woodland ever to grace the temperate world. And that forest is in trouble. If the global temperature rises by 4 degrees Celsius over the next 50 years, as is evidently possible, then the whole of the Appalachian wilderness below New England could become savanna. Already trees are dying in mysterious and frightening numbers. The elms and chestnuts are long gone. The stately hemlocks and flowery dogwoods are going, and the red spruces, Fraser firs, hickories, mountain ashes, and sugar maples may be about to follow. Clearly, if ever there was a time to experience this singular wilderness, it was now. So I decided to do it. More rashly, I announced my intention, told friends and neighbours, confidently informed my publisher, made it common knowledge among those who knew me. Then I bought some books and talked to people who had done the trail in whole or in part, and came gradually to realise this was way beyond anything I had attempted before. Nearly everyone I talked to had some gruesome story involving a guileless acquaintance who had gone off hiking the trail with high hopes and new boots and come stumbling back 2 days later with a bobcat attached to his head or dripping blood from an armless sleeve and whispering "bear" in a hoarse voice before sinking into a troubled unconsciousness. The woods were full of peril. Rattlesnakes and water moccasins and nests of copperheads, bobcats, bears, coyotes, wolves, and wild boar, loony hillbillies destabilized by gross quantities of impure corn liquor, generations of profoundly unbiblical sex, rabies, crazed skunks, raccoons and squirrels, merciless fire ants and ravening blackfly, poison ivy, poison sumac, poison salamanders, even a scattering of moose, levelly deranged by a parasitic worm that burrows a nest in their brains and befuddles them into chasing hapless hikers through remote, sunny meadows and into glacial lakes. Literally, unimaginable things could happen to you out there. I heard of a man who had stepped from his tent for a midnight pee and was swooped upon by a short-sighted hoot owl. The last he saw of his scalp, it was dangling from talons prettily silhouetted against a harvest moon, and of a young woman who was woken by a sinuous tickle across her belly, peeked into her sleeping bag to find a copperhead bunking down in the warmth between her legs. I heard 4 separate stories, always related with a chuckle, of campers and bears sharing tents for a few confused and lively moments, of people abruptly vaporized to had nothing left of them but a scorch mark, by body-sized bolts of lightning when caught in sudden storms on high ridgelines, of tents crushed beneath falling trees, or eased off precipices on ball bearings of beaded rain and sent paragliding onto distant valley floors, or swept away by the watery war of a flash flood of hikers beyond counting, whose last experience was trembling earth and the befuddled thought, now what the It required only a little light reading in adventure books and almost no imagination to envision circumstances in which I would find myself caught in a tightening circle of hunger emboldened wolves, staggering and shredding clothes under an onslaught of pincered fire ants, or dumbly transfixed by the sight of enlivened undergrowth advancing towards me like a torpedo through water, before being bowled backwards by a sofa-sized boar with cold, beady eyes, a piercing squeal, and a slaverous, chomping appetite for pink, plump, city-softened flesh. Then there were all the diseases lurking in the woods. Giardia lamblia, eastern equine... Well, I'm not going to say that. Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Lyme disease. I can't say any of them words. Eastern equid... Oh, I can't even do that one. Mosquito attacks the brain and central nervous system. If you're very lucky, you can hope to spend the rest of your life propped in a chair with a bib round your neck. But genuinely, it would kill you. There is no known cure. No less arresting as Lyme disease, which comes from the bite of a deer tick smaller than a pinhead. If undetected, it can lie dormant in the human body for years before erupting in a positive fiesta of maladies. No. This is a disease for the person who wants to experience it all. The symptoms begin with headaches, fatigue, fever, chills, shortness of breath, dizziness, and shooting pains in the extremities. Then march on to cardiac irregularities, facial paralysis, muscle spasms, severe mental impairment, loss of control of body functions, and not surprisingly, in the circumstances, chronic depression. Then there is the little-known family of organisms called hantaviruses, which swarm in the microhaze above the feces of mice and rats and are hoovered into the human respiratory system by anyone unlucky enough to stick a breathing orifice near them, by lying down, say, on a sleeping platform over which infected mice have recently scampered. In 1993, a single outbreak of hantavirus killed 32 people in the southwestern United States, and the following year, the disease claimed its first victim on the AT, when a hiker contracted it after sleeping in a rodent-infested shelter. All AT shelters are rodent-infested. Among viruses, only rabies, Ebola, and HIV are more certainly lethal. Again, there is no treatment. Finally, this being America, there is the constant possibility of murder. At least 9 hikers, the actual number depends on which source you consult and how you define a hiker, have been murdered along the trail since 1974. 2 young women would die while I was out there, for various practical reasons, principally to do with the long, punishing winters of northern New England. There are only so many available months to hike the trail each year. If you start at the northern end at Mount Katahdin in Maine, you must wait for the snows to clear in late May or June. If, on the other hand, you start in Georgia, head north, you must time it to finish before mid-October when the snows blow back in. Most people hike from south to north with spring. ideally keeping one step ahead of the worst of the hot weather and more irksome and infectious of insects. My intention was to start in the south in early March. I put aside 6 weeks for the first leg. The precise length of the Appalachian Trail is a matter of interesting uncertainty. The US National Park Service, which constantly distinguishes itself in a variety of alarming ways, manages in a single leaflet to give the length of the trail as 2,155 miles and 2,200 miles. The official Appalachian Trail guides, a set of 11 books, each detailing with a particular state or section, variously give the length as 2,144 miles, 2,147 miles, 2,159 miles, and more than 2,150 miles. The Appalachian Trail Conference, the governing body in 1993, put the trail length at exactly 2,146.7 miles, then changed for a couple of years to a hesitantly vague more than 2,150 miles, but has recently returned to confident precision with a length of 2,160.2 miles. In 1993, 3 people rolled a measuring wheel along its entire length and came with a distance of 2,164.9 miles. At about the same time, a careful measure based on a full set of US Geological Survey maps put the distance at 2,118.3 miles. What is certain is that it is a long way, and from either end it is not easy. The peaks of the Appalachian Trail are not particularly formidable as mountains go. The highest, Clingman's Dome in Tennessee, tops out at a little under 6,700 feet. But they are big enough and they go on and on. There are more than 350 peaks, over 5,000 feet along the AT, perhaps 1,000 more in the vicinity. In a week you can cross 50 Snowdons. Altogether, it takes about 5 months and 5 million steps to walk the trail from end to end. And of course, on the AT, you must lug on your back everything you need. It may seem obvious, but it came as a small shock to me to realize this wasn't going to be even remotely like an amble through the Lake District, where you head off for the day with a haversack containing a packed lunch and a copy of Wainwright, and at day's end retire from the hills to an inn. Here you sleep out of doors, cook your own food. Few people manage to carry less than 40 pounds. And when you're hauling that kind of weight, believe me, never for a moment does it escape your notice. It is one thing to walk 2,000 miles, quite another to walk 2,000 miles with a wardrobe on your back. My first inkling of just how daunting an undertaking it was became when I went to our local outfitters, the Dartmouth Co-op, to purchase equipment. My son had just got an after-school job there, so I was under strict instructions of good behaviour. Specifically, I was not to say or do anything stupid, try on anything that would require me to expose my stomach, say, "Are you shitting me?" when informed of the price of a product, be conspicuously inattentive when a sales assistant was explaining the correct maintenance or aftercare of a product, and above all, not to don anything inappropriate, like a woman's ski hat, in an attempt to amuse. I was told to ask for Dave Mengel, because he had walked large parts of the trail himself and was something of an encyclopedia of outdoor knowledge. A kindly and differential sort of fellow, Mengel could talk for perhaps 4 days solid with interest about any aspect of hiking equipment. I've never been so simultaneously impressed and bewildered. He spent a whole afternoon going through his stock. He would say things to me like, "Now this has a 70 denier high-density abrasion resistance fly with a rip-top sleeve. On the other hand, and I'll be frank with you here," and he would lean towards me and reduce his voice to a low, candid tone, as if disclosing that it had once been arrested in a public toilet with a sailor. "The seams are lap-felled rather than bias-taped, and the vestibule is a little cramped." I think because I mentioned that I had done a bit of hiking in England, he assumed some measure of competence on my part. I didn't wish to alarm or disappoint him, so when he asked me questions like, "What's your view on carbon fibre stays?" I would shake my head with a rueful chuckle in recognition of the famous variability of views on the perennially thorny issue and saying, you know, Dave, I've never been able to make up my mind on that one. What do you think? Together, we discussed and gravely considered the relative merits of side compression straps, spindrift collars, crampon patches, load transfer differentials, airflow channels, webbing loops, and something called the occipital cutout ratio. We went through that with every item. Even aluminium cook set offered considerations of weight, compactness, thermal dynamics, and general utility that could occupy a mind for hours. In between, there were lots of discussion about hiking generally, mostly to do with hazards like rockfalls, bear encounters, cook stove explosions, and snake bites, which he described with a certain mystified fondness before coming back to the topic at hand. With everything, he talked a lot about weight. It seemed to me a trifle over fastidious, I don't know, to choose one sleeping bag over another because it weighed 3 ounces less. But as equipment piled up around us, I began to appreciate how ounces accumulated into pounds. I hadn't expected to buy so much. I already owned hiking boots, a Swiss Army knife, and a plastic map pouch that you wear around your neck on a piece of string, so I felt I was pretty well there. But the more I talked to Dave, the more I realized that I was shopping for an expedition. The two big shocks were how expensive everything was. Each time Dave dodged into the storeroom or went off to confirm a denier rating, I stole looks at price tags and was invariably appalled. And every piece of equipment appeared to require some further piece of equipment. If you bought a sleeping bag, you needed a safe sack for it. The stuff sack cost $29. I found this an increasingly difficult concept to warm to. When after much solemn consideration, I settled on a backpack, a very expensive Gregory, top of the range, no point in stinting here, sort of thing. He said, now, what kind of straps do you want with that? I beg your pardon? I said, and recognized at once that I was on the brink of a dangerous condition known as retail burnout. No more now would I blithely say, better give me half a dozen of those, Dave. Oh, and take each of these, what the heck, make a dozen. You only live once, eh? The mound of provisions that a minute ago had looked so pleasingly abundant and exciting, all new, all mine, suddenly seemed burdensome, extravagant. Straps, Dave explained. You know, to tie on your sleeping bag and lash things down. Doesn't come with straps? I said in a new level tone. Oh no. He surveyed a wall of products and touched a finger to his nose. You need a rain cover too, of course. I blinked. A rain cover? Why? To keep out the rain. The backpack's not rainproof? He grimaced, as if making an exceptionally delicate distinction. Wow. Not 100%. This was extraordinary to me. Really? Did it not occur to the manufacturer that people might want to take their packs outdoors from time to time, perhaps even go camping for them? How much is this pack anyway? $250. $250? Are you I paused and put on a new tone. Are you saying, Dave, that I pay $250 for a pack and it doesn't have straps and it isn't waterproof? He nodded. Does it have a bottom in it? Mengel smiled uneasily. It was not in his nature to grow critical or wary in the rich, promising world of camping equipment. The straps come in a choice of 6 colours, he offered helpfully. I ended up with enough equipment to bring full employment to a vow of Sherpas, a 3-season tent, self-inflating sleeping pad, nested pots and pans, folding cutlery, plastic dish and cup, complicated pump action water purifier, stuffed sacks in a rainbow of colours, seam sealer, patch kit, sleeping bag, bungee cords, water bottles, waterproof poncho, waterproof matches, pack cover, rather nifty compass, thermometer keyring, a little collapsible stove that looked frankly like trouble, gas bottle and spare gas bottle, hands-free torch that you wear on your head like a miner's lamp. This I liked very much. A big knife for killing bears and hillbillies, insulated long johns and vests, 4 bandanas and lots of other stuff, some of which I had to go back again and ask what it was actually for. I drew the line at buying a designer ground cloth for $59.95, knowing I could acquire a lawn tarp at Kmart for $5. I also said no to a first aid kit, sewing kit, anti-snake bite kit, $12 emergency whistle, and small orange plastic shovel for burying one's poop, on the grounds that these were unnecessary, too expensive, or invited ridicule. The orange spade in particular seemed to shout, "Greenhorn, sissy, make way for Mr. Buttercup." Then, just to get it all over and done with at once, I went to the local bookshop and bought books. The Through Hiker's Handbook, Walking the Appalachian Trail, several books on wildlife and the natural sciences, geological history of the Appalachian Trail by the exquisitely named V. Collins Chew, and the complete and aforementioned set of official Appalachian Trail guides, consisting of 11 small paperback books, 59 maps in different sizes, styles and scales covering the whole trail from Springer Mountain to Mount Katahdin, and ambitiously priced at $233.45 the set. On the way out, I noticed a volume called Bear Attacks, Their Causes and Avoidance. Opened it up at random, found the sentence, "This is a clear example of the general type of incident in which a black bear sees a person and decides to try to kill and eat him," and tossed that into the shopping basket too. I took all this home and carried it down to the basement in several trips. There was such a lot. Nearly all of it technologically unfamiliar to me, which made it more exciting and daunting. Mostly daunting. I put the hands-free torch on my head for the heck of it, and poured the tent from its plastic packaging, erected it on the floor. I unfurled the self-inflating sleeping pad and pushed it inside and followed that with my fluffy new sleeping bag. Then I crawled in and lay there for quite a long time, trying out for size the expensive, confined, strangely new-smelling, entirely novel space that was soon to be my home from home. I tried to imagine myself lying, not in a basement beside the reassuring, cosily domesticated roar of the furnace, but rather outside in a high mountain pass, listening to wind and tree noise, the lonely cry of dog-like creatures, the hoarse whisper of a Georgian mountain accent saying, "Hey, Virgil, there's one over here. You'll remember the rope." But I couldn't really. Hadn't been in a space like this since I stopped making dens with blankets and card tables at about the age of 9. It was really quite snug. Once you got used to the smell, which I naively presumed would dissipate over time, and the fact that the fabric gave everything inside a sickly greenish pallor, like the glow of a radar screen. It was not so bad. A little claustrophobic, perhaps. A little odd smelling, but cozy and sturdy even so. This wouldn't be so bad, I told myself. But secretly, I knew I was quite wrong. Yeah, I'm going to just leave it there. I may come back and do chapter 2. I mean, I've tried to just stick to chapter 1's. More so for copyright reasons, really. I tried to stick to the length that a sample would naturally be. I'm sure chapter 2 would cover a sample. But yeah, it's you can get tongue-tied with that one for sure. That had some big words. When I say big, like complicated. Some of them were like mental. It was no way I was even going to get it. Where was it? Because it was like a whole load of them in succession. So normally if you get one, you might give it an attempt. When you just saw them coming at you, it's like, there's no way. There's no way we're going to just play... let's learn these words today. It was mad. I find out there was another word, I can't remember what it was, and it was quite it was just complicated for no reason. There was just no need to add it to the book. I mean, sometimes some authors just try to be too smart, and I just think it just takes you off because there's no need for that. Words should flow. I think words should flow. Yeah, there's always an alternative word, so you can be overly intelligent. Now I know they're doing it from the person's narrative, for instance, and if that's how they naturally talk, that's what they're trying to do. But I think to make people stumble and step backwards, I think you lose the flow. And I think as an author, it's like maybe choose more easily readable words. Personally, but anyway, like I say, I love the film, so I sort of know where the book's going. But it was nice because it was going quite in depth about all of it as well.